Quick disclaimer, pretty much everything that you see or hear today has been based on real life incidents. Um, if you've got any questions for me, I'd request you to tag me on Twitter, and my handle is Adya. So let's dive in. Sorry, guys, this just is not working. Um, okay, that's better. Okay, so after spending about 5 minutes fiddling with various settings and controls on Zoom and PowerPoint, we have come to a realization, in a funny way, that the world has always been in the VUCA mode. And that's what this presentation's all about. So what is VUCA, and how can leaders lead teams, businesses, their ventures, pretty much everything they do in this VUCA world is the objective of the presentation. Imagine yourself to be in a situation like this, where things are beyond your control. What would you do? As a leader, you're expected to steady the ship. As a leader, you're expected to know what you're doing, know something which is completely beyond your control, take the next wave head on, um, stay upright, and yet somehow manage to stay calm in the process. That's precisely the world we are living in right now. These days, we call it Corona or COVID 19. But if you look at it, the concept of VUCA has been with us for the last few millennia. And let's look at the last 100 years. We have had two world wars. We have had the Cold War. We've had the Middle Eastern crisis. We had 9/11, then the financial recession, and then several other events which have triggered um, uncertainties, pushing the world in the VUCA mode. So the thing we've realized with Corona is change is pretty much the only constant. Change is something we have to live with, and that change is something we have no control over. However, if we play with change, we can create opportunities in the process. So let's look at a few ways of doing that. Like I mentioned, the world's always been in VUCA. The world's been volatile. You never know where the next disruption could come from. Companies which took 60 years to come to 100 billion valuation were decimated in a matter of minutes. And companies which were startups became billion dollar companies during this disruption. The world is very uncertain um, because of the dependencies between various systems, processes, various functions, politics, philosophy, pretty much everything that you can think of. Um, you never know, or you don't have any control over where the next disruption is going to come from. The world is very complex because of the interconnectivity, because of um, the way things are dependent on each other, both as upstream systems and downstream systems. And the world is only getting more and more complicated. So uh, with regards to disruptions, what starts off as a spark could turn into a forest fire, and it's very ambiguous. You are presented with choices all the time, and depending on the choice you make, you could either go down the rabbit hole or you could end up bust. So as leaders, taking decisions has been um, has never been this difficult. So now that we have understood what the problem statement is, let's look at chaos and VUCA from a slightly different lens. Imagine um, the concept of normalcy, right? It is an illusion. What is normal to the spider is essentially chaos for the fly. It depends on who you are, really, whether you're the spider or the fly. That depends. That changes the perspective you look at life. You look at the change. You look at the VUCA world around you. The moment you bring in action and you take some steps, some tangible steps, you reduce or you mitigate your risks, and you reduce the fear of the unknown, of the uncertain, of the complex, of the ambiguous. Um, there is nothing about a caterpillar that tells you that it is going to turn into a butterfly. If you apply the same philosophy to what you do with your businesses, what you do with um, the markets in general, you never know how you can turn um, an event like this into an opportunity. So you have to keep an open mind, because at the end of the day, your brain constructs your reality based on what you pay attention to. If you pay attention to the chaos, you will be fearful, you will be scared, you will be you will find it difficult. However, if you look at opportunities, hidden opportunities, things could go your way, so much so that you start functioning in some sort of autopilot mode, right? um, it is only in times like these where your true genius comes out. It's only when things go against you that you start thinking out of the box. And that's where your leadership comes into play. So leadership, as we have seen, has never been so difficult in our lifetimes. And leadership has never been as crucial as it is right now. So broadly speaking, there are three types of leaders, right? There are those leaders who make it happen. The second type see it happening. And then there's a third type who wonder what happened. The first type of leaders are the entrepreneurs. They have the entrepreneurial mindset, the entrepreneurial resilience, the entrepreneurial drive, and the tenacity to make things happen. Something like this. They look at opportunities in pretty much every single thing they do, every single thing they take on. Yet, beautifully. And most of us in this forum have been there, done that, right? Then there's the second style of leadership, which is not exactly leadership. They're more the managerial type. They're do as directed. Um, they're great with execution, but when it comes to vision, or when it comes to leading teams through the unknown, they're quite rubbish at it, either because of the lack of experience or the lack of intent. Um, Yet they are really crucial when it comes to execution. We'll talk about execution in a few minutes. But when it comes to leadership, um, you will need a combination of leadership and management of people who can execute. Then there's the third type, the people who wonder what happened. These are the academics, people who sit and observe, the armchair warriors. And if you have a leader who falls in the third category, um, this is what my reaction is going to be like. So let's look at a few interesting observations based on my experiences with various businesses of the past few years. Many strategies fail because they're not actually strategies, they are more plans. Strategies work on a compounding basis. as opposed to the linear models that we have been using. They're essentially execution plans, right? So now that we've established the type of leaders and uh, the type of strategies that leaders use, etc. Um, let's look at some of the questions. I want to read out everything on screen, um, but these are some of the questions that leaders these days ask themselves and others and ponder over. So if some of them resonate with you, then I think you'll love the next part of the session. Okay, um, so let's dive in then. But first, uh, I'd like to present a one-page summary of who I am and what I've done, using facts, figures, and a nice little story. Um, I think it was S- S- uh, Sanjeev or I beg your pardon, Shiv, who gave my introduction earlier, and yes, thank you for that elaborate introduction. But I just want to present my experience from a slightly different lens, as an entrepreneur, as an engineer, as an MBA, and as an investor. And you can see from this experience um, that I've been there, done that, succeeded and failed, trying to do a lot of things, sometimes everything. And when I distill all that experience um, into what I'm doing, I call myself the growth zymologist. And the zymologist, as you're aware, is a person who brews beer. And when it comes to brewing beer, which is something I did back in the day when I was in the UK, um, when you brew beer, you have to understand the importance of each ingredient. You have to understand the timing, the dependencies. You have to understand um, how the quantity and the methods of brewing. Right. That's something I do with businesses these days, which is one of the reasons I like using this moniker. Um, and what I'm doing currently with Adan Corporate is I work with small, mid-sized businesses on pretty much the whole spectrum of corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, strategy, risk management, and pretty much the whole shebang of services that small, mid-sized businesses require across the whole cycle of their growth, um, be it um, be it the founders round or an IPO exit. Um, I've been there, done that on pretty much um, every scale. Okay, so going back, sorry to digress there. Going back, let's look at how leaders can develop their entrepreneurial resilience. And let's take the example of what's going on around us. You can't really use what you have done in the last 15, 20 years with what's going on right now. Otherwise, you would fall in the hindsight trap. Um, the road ahead is extremely blurry. It's VUCA out there. So let's look at definitive ways on cutting down VUCA and making VUCA something more manageable. Okay. So I had to redefine leadership using a slightly different definition. I won't read it out, but the point I'm trying to make is people have entrusted you with the responsibility that you have right now. And unless you realize the higher purpose and understand the bigger picture, it is very difficult to survive in this VUCA world. Okay, let me give you an example of what the survival, what's this survival bias I'm talking about. So this is the snapshot of an aeroplane from World War II, which returned to its base having faced military fire. Okay, as you can see, there are certain sections of the aeroplane um, which have lots of bullet holes in them. Right now, as a leader, if you think of it, which parts of the aeroplane would you fix first before sending that aeroplane back into the battlefield? Would you fix the sections riddled with bullet holes, or the ones which are untouched? This is called the survival bias for a reason. Bear in mind that this is the snapshot of an aeroplane which has returned from the enemy fire. Okay, um, it means that the aeroplane was able to survive despite having all these bullet holes in these areas, which means that aeroplanes which did not make their way back were shot in these areas. So as a leader, the military commander chose to armor this spot here because that was the most vulnerable when it came to facing enemy fire. So um, the epiphany from this bizarre incident is that it's only when we are lost that we start realizing who we are, that we begin to understand ourselves. And that's exactly what's happening to a lot of people. It's only when people are pushed out of their comfort zone, when they are pushed into the VUCA world, they realize what their true nature, their true character, their true potential is. So let's look at reducing VUCA. How do you reduce volatility? Volatility stems from ignorance or the lack of understanding or the lack of control, right? So if one invests a little bit of time in understanding the four quadrants of the Johari window, as it's called, there are bits of information which you know about you, the known knowns as they're called. And there are things that others know about you, which is unknown to self. These are the blind spots. So it could be something about your speech, about your diction, about some hidden capabilities which you are not aware of, your blind spots, right? You can reduce that by asking for feedback. Similarly, there are things which are unknown to others, which is one of the reasons they don't know those things about you. So it's only by the methods of disclosure or opening up that you are able to reduce this hidden area, something that Reciprocity in this forum is doing, right? uh, it's about showing those talents, showing your capabilities and what you do. But this little quadrant here, the unknown unknown, contributes the most to volatility and uncertainty as we know it. So if you are able to zero in and reduce what this quadrant is by constant disclosures and constant feedback, you would be able to understand what you are really in control of and what is completely beyond your control. Because if you come to a realization that you value certain things which are completely beyond your control, no matter what you do, you will learn to let go. You will learn to focus your energies on things which are in your control, thereby reducing volatility. Similarly, by using the Johari window method, you get to see where you really stand in the entire ecosystem, in the landscape. And that's when you realize how you can change yourself, change your business team, change your strategy, change the way you perceive the volatility. Okay. Now, looking at it from a business perspective, um, if the business is extremely volatile, the first thing that I would do personally is look at the cash flow, because cash is king and cash flow rules. If you don't have cash, if you don't have the liquidity, then you can't really run a business. So the first thing you need to do when you are in a distressed situation like the one that we are going through right now is understand what the impact is from a financial perspective to begin with, and do everything you can to work on the cash flow to reduce that cash gap. and one can be as creative as they come. Several countries, for example, have opened up government grants and schemes. You can explore those. You can look at various ways of doing contract, like off-take agreements, where you supply things at a discount, and then see how it goes. So that is a really uh, crucial um, parameter when it comes to running businesses, and this will hopefully help reduce the volatility that's there. Now let's talk about the next evil, the uncertainty. um, when the crisis struck in February this year, we thought it was going to be a 6-month exercise tops. But now we are looking at a multi-year recovery. We don't know a lot of things. We don't know how long uh, various phases are going to be. We are talking of a second wave already, right? We don't know what the recovery timelines are like. We don't know when the vaccine is going to be um, invented or discovered, um, distributed, mass productionized, distributed, etc. So we are having to deal with this uncertainty um, in our daily life any which way. But from a business perspective, as a leader, you will have a lot of noise coming from various quarters. But to understand what you should really focus on, you should try to cut down all the noise that comes with it. So, to produce the signal that you require, the signal to your stakeholders, the signal to your business, the signal to yourself for that matter, to stay calm and to show that you're under control. Um, you have to mute the noise. However, once you've understood what the truth is, you only see one side of the truth. Your perspective depends on what side you are on. Even with uh, that perspective, you can still do wonders with what you're doing, as long as you have the signal correct, right? And that can be achieved only by constant disclosure, being transparent about the true state of things, as well as eliciting feedback, because this is what we think, and this is what we know, and this is what we think we know. And in reality, uh, it's nothing like it. Okay, so it's only via constant feedback and self introspection and being self aware can leaders actually make a difference. And instead of trying to do 50 things, if we stick to doing just one or two things, we can do a lot more. There is only so much that one person can do. As entrepreneurs, we are guilty of trying to do everything. So I suppose we have to hit the brakes and at some point think about what is it that we really want to do. It's good to have a vision, an end point. It's good to have the path ready. So we have to be stubborn with the vision. This is where we are heading. By 6 months, the focus is survival, and in 12 months' time, the focus is resuming business as usual. So if we go in with this vision, we can plan things on a weekly or a monthly basis. And there are certain ways in which you can achieve that. Um, and this is what we've been doing at Adan Corporate. We help businesses get to that stage. It's all about connecting the dots. It's all about understanding point A to point B and how you get from point A to point B. So if you look at it, without a plan, you're lost. And that is where VUCA plays havoc. But if you have a plan in mind, you can execute it. So that is how you can manage uncertainty. Now let's look at complexity. How do you break the complexity down into its subcomponents? So the first thing is understanding the process, because if you can't really describe what you're doing as a process, you really don't know what you're doing with your business. If you don't know what your unit economics are, and whether or not you're making money or losing money with every sale, uh, you are in deep trouble. So the first thing is understanding. what your business does, what the business model is, what the unit economics is. And it's only, post discovering that and post discovering what the problems are, that you start breaking down the difficult problems into a tiny web of easy problems. So it's very easy to manage dependencies and resolve these easy problems, the problems which take a few hours or a few days, as opposed to looking at a problem which could take a few months to solve. There are certain ways in which you can do that, and this is traditionally the approach that I've been taking with the businesses I deal with, breaking it down all the way from strategy to supply chain to delivery, the impact on cash flow, and then doing a bottom up approach again, the financials, the operations, and finally the sales. This also allows me to bring in other dimensions such as people, um, various resources, capex, opex, pretty much everything that businesses comprise of. And using the top down and the bottom up analysis, you can understand where the bottlenecks are. And then we try to make it simple, because simple is really hard. Once we have understood what the problem statement is, as leaders, we can then start working on a plan, because that is the best way to kill anxiety. If you do not have a plan, you do not know where you're heading. If you do not understand what the scope, time, and um, budget are, then it's very difficult to execute, right? However, like we've discussed on a couple of occasions in this meeting, um, it's not all about facts and figures. It's also about the story. It's also about how you present what the future is going to look like to your stakeholders, to your suppliers, to your bank, to your lenders, that is, to your equity stakeholders. And it's also about aligning that story with the numbers. The numbers do tell a story, but it's about interpreting those numbers. It's about conveying that story forward in terms or in the language that uh, the downstream systems or the downstream suppliers understand. If you work on these aspects, you can cut down complexity to sort of help you get out of the VUCA world. And the last piece that I want to focus on is the ambiguity. Um, if you look at it, ambiguity means having to choose between two things, two or more things. Simply put, it's about deciding what to let go of and what to hold on to, right? It's about asking what is important as opposed to waiting for things to happen. If you keep asking whether I need it or not, you will be able to take that decision. If within the realm of possibilities of actions, you're able to understand what the priority is, and like we saw in the uncertain space, if you understand what the priority is and if you execute the plan based on that priority, you will be able to um, deliver far greater results for your business. For example, if you understand that shipments and fixing the supply chain is a priority, or creating transparency or digitization is a priority, then those priorities can have a knock-on effect, a positive knock-on effect on pretty much everything else. So even when it comes to dealing with priorities, um, you should always have a short-term urgency for action, but have a long-term patience with results. Survival is key, yes, but you should also look at the longer picture when you take these decisions. And finally, this is what I was hoping to show with regards to the vision. So the vision is very important, but without execution, vision is nothing. And execution, as you can see from this chart here, execution is what provides the vision, the momentum, or the weight to move forward. And with the right vision and the right execution, you can get the right results. However, even having the best strategy in the world, the most beautiful strategy in the world, is useless unless there are results. And without results, your business could go bankrupt. So, as a leader, we have to focus on both strategy and results. They go hand in hand. So, how do you develop? And that can happen through digitization of systems. Um, just a couple more slides before we conclude. As a perfectionist in the non-VUCA world, we've always done things with the intent of creating something really perfect in mind. But it's the iterator or the person who keeps doing, failing, repeating, doing things again, failing again, is the person who succeeds and goes the furthest. So if there are certain strategies which have worked, please continue with them. If there are certain strategies which have failed, iterate, but keep moving forward. Because if you do not do anything, it's a failure. The worst that can happen is you can commit mistakes and learn from them. So, with that in mind, the VUCA world awaits you, and I wish you the very best in facing the VUCA world. Thank you.